Okay. Hi. We are back with the interview, but with another method. We're talking over Skype, and we'll start from the second question. Um, but Google Hangouts on Air didn't work. I'm using one of the flip cameras from my department, and I will post the recording later on YouTube. So
Okay.
the question was, what is your perspective of US culture? What are some key similarities and differences between US culture and the culture of your own country?
My perspective is I think the US culture emphasizes patriotism. I see a lot of patriotism in the US citizens, as opposed to my country where we are learning to be patriotic now, but I think what I see happening here is the tribe. Somewhere we have 42 tribes, and so the tribe comes before the nation in most cases. But what cuts across both cultures that I saw is the belief in hard work. Though again, the approach to hard work here would be different because what I see in the American culture, what I saw in the American culture, it was so bent on capitalism, and it had a lot of individualism as a big value of the society, as opposed to my Kenyan culture, which is so bent on African socialism, where the extended family and the larger family and even the neighborhood plays a very significant role in your day-to-day activities.
So there are similarities and differences. Yes. Um,
Mhm. Yes, there are similarities and differences.
but
Um,
what is your people's impression on the U.S.? What is the perception? How do you think those impressions have been formed? Has the media, maybe U.S., international, or in your own country, contributed to forming those impressions?
yes, I think one of the biggest impression that I know my people view the American people as is that America is a land of opportunities, and so all Americans are rich.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say, yeah, that the media has contributed a great deal, and maybe in this perception more because of what cuts across, especially in the entertainment media. When we look at the movies, when we look at the kind of soaps that are produced in America, in Hollywood, for example, you see the kind of houses, you see the kind of lifestyle that the people are leading. Then, of course, you get the perception that this is what an American is. And so that's why I can agree that yes, the media has played a significant role in shaping that kind of opinion of what the Kenyans or most people in Kenya might think Americans are. Yeah.
Do you feel like some of the perceptions, for example, of the Hollywood perception of the United States was transformed in a way in that center in Nigeria? Yes, in Nollywood. Yes,
Yes, yes,
the
yes,
the
yes.
same model of showing bombastic things, extraordinary things.
I think that the American culture or the American soaps have really and even in situational comedies really depict what the American life is. I used to watch, and sometimes I used to think, sometimes I'd watch situational comedies and get those voices in the background reacting, maybe laughing, getting amused.
Right.
And for me, it didn't make sense. There was nothing funny. But when I lived there, then I understood. You see, if I then saw people talking about Starbucks, I knew what Starbucks is, and now I could relate and I could see where the humor may be coming from. But if for those who have never maybe lived or experienced the American life, then some of the humor would be dry. So that's why then what you're looking at in those movies or in those programs is more the lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do they lead? What kind of um, clothes do they wear? What kind of food do they eat? And so then we start to imagine that every American lives like that. And until you get there and maybe get to situations where you see that, yes, you can also have people living on the streets in America, then it's a big shock because you don't get to see things like those on media at all.
Right.
All that you see is the glamorous side of America. Right. And that's why when even Kenyans come to America, when they come back home, they view them differently. You'll be teased and be told, "Where's the green money? Did you bring some dollars? Did you make some money?" And also because then one very strong aspect that I learned, or that I think America is very good at, or the people, is that you get value for what you put in. That your work, you are rewarded, commensurate to the effort that you've put in, which may be different in my culture or my country, where there's a lot of nepotism and there's a lot of corruption. So sometimes it's not so much what you're worth, but more important, who you know at the higher ranks. Yes.
Also, what is the perception of America from the political or military point of view?
America is a superpower, of course, and you want to be on the safe side by being a good ally of America. So it's no secret that there's a superpower that politically America calls the shots, and you really want to be in good books with America, and so I will not be in a position to give a political view, but my personal view is that yes. Even the political elites in this country want to identify with the political elites in America, and that's why if you looked at a lot of our politicians, they will at one time or the other make a trip to the United States, either to meet with fellow politicians, or like the congressmen or the senators. Or sometimes they'll even just want to go to institutions and be able, to try to marshal support from maybe the Kenyans living abroad through those institutions. So I think that America is a very strong country politically in terms of calling the shots. And yes, it has also a very big impact on this country. And especially now that your president has that paternal connection to Kenya, I think then it carries a very strong political influence on this country.
By the way, the majority of the people in Kenya are Christian or Muslim?
Christians, I think about 80% Christians, and maybe just roughly 20% would be Muslims. But the number, of course, is growing.
Right. Why do you say of course?
No, I'm saying, of course, it's growing because you can see from the numbers, from the activities that have been going around. Now you get the voice of the Muslims coming out strongly, feeling like they are a minority, and of course when you see the acts of terrorism that want to be pegged on religion, there's no really guarantee or no direct connection that terrorism is tied to Muslim or to Islam. But they would want, to try, maybe by pegging their acts on religion, then they think they can get more followers, they can get more sympathy from, the people from that religion.
Okay. Earlier you were telling me about some stereotypes concerning the U.S., that everybody might be rich here because you see those soap operas. But what other stereotypes do you have, or have you encountered about U.S., and did they uphold when you saw U.S. for yourself? Were they really happening like that?
One, of course, is that many people in the U.S. are extravagant in every way. Like everything in the U.S. is big. They want big cars, they want big houses, they want big stuff, including big size. Like Americans are fat, and and yes, I'm big-bodied myself. I'm fat, and so I think it was a big consolation when I was there see people that were bigger than me. So that I kind of confirmed, and of course it goes with the habits. But that's not to say that there are no small people. Actually, there are more smaller people than fat people. But because you stand out, I think then it becomes so obvious that somebody wants to identify and pull that out. And then the other thing that I would say, other than that Americans are rich, it's also that I would say the Americans very explicit in their behavior. And this maybe I'll be comparing to my own culture, where you do not want people don't show affection, like people would not want to openly show their affection, even if they were a couple, for example, But you see, for the Americans, it's everyday life. They'll hold hands, they'll kiss on the streets, they'll which is not very very common in my culture. In fact, culturally, among some of the communities here, when you found a couple, like when the couple leaves the road, their house, going together to a place, you'll find the man walking like almost 200 meters ahead of the lady.
Wow.
And the lady is like almost 200 meters behind, and yet they're going to the same place, maybe going to a party, maybe going to a funeral, going to church, but they'll not walk together holding hands,
Okay.
or holding each other,
But so far 200 meters, so far from each other.
Yes, as far as
Wow,
200 meters, and yet he'll be watching over his shoulder, knowing that there's somebody coming behind. So it could be as long as that. So like that's very typical of an African couple, Though of course things are changing now, but that would be very very typical of that. One of the other things that I had an impression of, and maybe also coming out of the movies that I watched, was that Americans are racists.
What movie did you watch?
I'm saying just watching, you'll see the blacks, are kind of stereotypically always the bad ones. They'll be the ones that are in the gangs, and then, the whites are the good people, they're the ones that are. But, of course, I realized that we even had a debate about it in the University of Maryland when I was there. And we realized there is actually more perception, because if you want to really dig deeper, then you'll realize that it's more a stereotype that has been ingrained because of the behavior of the past, like you'll find actually a lot of the black neighborhoods, a few of those things happening, and then it kind of just gets into the minds of a lot of, especially the youths when they're growing, knowing that, if you go to these areas, maybe they would be dangerous for you. And not. And there was even an experience that we had one time. One of the ladies shared with us that they would see some black people walking toward them, and they would already start to fear. Are we safe where we are? But really, when they get to them, they realize, no, these are just campus people like us. They're friendly and they're able to talk. So that is one of the myths or the impressions that I had before I came there, which were dispelled. And then another is that I confirmed that is actually a myth I'd also thought of, is that much as the Americans want to look like very knowledgeable, they actually do not know much outside their own country or outside their own environments. And that I actually kind of confirmed, because many of the colleagues that I met at the university, even when sometimes you told them you're from Kenya, they didn't know where Kenya is. You had to really go on the map and show them where Kenya is, because for them it's just, you're from Africa, and maybe they think Africa is one small country. They can't place whatever country, whatever each of the countries are. Unlike in the Kenyan system, where right from elementary school, you actually are learning about the world. You learn about history of the world, you're learning about geography of the world, you're learning, so much about other places which are not necessarily within our country. So I found that as a big difference.
I saw just earlier an article about, I think it was about BBC, you know, not being clear about where the tragedy that happened a few days ago with Boko Haram, they were considering that it was going on in Kenya instead of Nigeria, you know, so it was a big confusion.
I think it's because of the recent terrorist attack that we had in the northern part of Kenya, Garissa, that might have been confused for Boko Haram. You know, Boko Haram is in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see, and of course now you just realize that all that they know is that there's a terrorist attack. You know, there's all this happening, and it's in Africa, so you can't quite place where West Africa is, East Africa, or South Africa.
Right. Okay, moving on to the next one. What are you most proud of about your own culture? What do you value the most culturally? It's number 5.
What I value most about my culture is the warmth. People are really, really warm from the heart, you know, warm towards each other.
Yes.
Very affectionate, very warm, very mindful of others, especially the larger community, and then the respect for age, respect for the older
Elders.
people, you know, which is entrenched in instilled in you right from childhood. That you know, you must respect people that are older than you. That you must always be able to help them, and that you must show that respect. In fact, in some of the cultures, the respect is so physically visible, even in the way you greet. You know, the way you shake hands. You know, like you don't shake somebody like an elder's hand. It's I'd rather you just put the head like the master. You put the head and then they'll touch your forehead. You know, which is more also like a blessing. You don't shake their hands. So and then it's mandatory that you are the one that reaches out, you know, to them all the time. So I think that's one value that I like, that works well in terms of, and then the communal ownership, because when you find one, like a child going astray in a community, you don't wait to report this child to the parent, you know, to the mother or the father. You take action, because this is a child of the community. This is your child. Any child within your community is your own child. Any parent within the community is your own parent. So, you know, you hold that respect, and they also hold that responsibility towards children. So I really find that enriching, because then you grow up into, you know, a very, with those values, and into a very respectable person.
Right. So, what do you personally value most culturally?
I think I love music, and so I have all through, as I grow up, enjoyed the use of song and dance in passing on important information to the society, to generations. You know, just handing over, you know, some of those values from one generation to the other. And one aspect, like from the community where I come, that I usually find very interesting, and is still practiced today, much as it's dying off, especially during circumcision, is the way they look at, they ridicule those that they think are going astray or do not conform to some of the social norms, in a very easy and enjoyable way. You know, they'll sing a song and ridicule you and tell you, you know, you have to stop this kind of behavior. You have to behave in this kind of way, and you know, it'll be in a very warm and joyful way that people don't even realize that they are admonishing you, but actually it works on the people, because you do not want to be the community's ridicule. You know, when there's a celebration, and then what happens is your name comes out as a social misfit, or somebody who does not conform to some of the values of the community, and you're being asked, you know, to to relook your ways and conform to what is considered the norm. So for me, I find I've always enjoyed that. It comes very naturally, and it really, it leaves a lasting memory on me, that sometimes even as I grow up and I try to reflect on those songs and try to sing them, then I realize that they were very loaded with a lot of good information that can still be carried forward. So I really, really value that.
How culturally complex is Kenya? For example, I know that in Nigeria there are about 200 dialects in the same country, because
Yes.
of the tribal life and so on and so forth. I guess there's one national language and then many dialects, and also on top of that English.
Yes.
How many dialects?
We have about 42 dialects in Kenya. And I think one of the biggest unifying factors, or that makes Kenya a very easy country for anybody to live in, is that English is the business language, and Kiswahili is the national language, and they're both taught in schools as languages, right from elementary school, and they're used in all official communication. In fact, now both of them, initially it was mainly English. Kiswahili was a secondary, but now Kiswahili is equally used in official communication, including even in parliamentary debates, where once you start to debate in Swahili, as long as you can flow in Swahili, then you continue. So the national language, the Swahili national language, and the use of English in schools has been a very big unifying factor for the country, so that regardless of which dialect, the original dialect you speak is, you can always communicate with anybody across the country using either English or Kiswahili. And that has worked well for the country.
How is your tribe called?
My tribe is I can almost say a minority. It's called Tachoni.
Tachoni.
But it's Tachoni. Tachoni, Tachoni.
Okay.
But it's one of the other many dialects in the sub-tribe that is called Luhya. The Luhya come from the western part of Kenya. We border Uganda. On the western part of Kenya, we border Uganda, and we're also neighbors to the Luo. Yeah, so I'm Luhya, but now going deeper into the smaller tribe, then I'm Tachoni. Because even among the Luhya, then we also have smaller sub-tribes that comprise the Luhya.
Right. And how big is the population in Kenya? How many people?
The official statistics is, I think, about 44 million now. And but I think that is 2009 or 2010. I can't quite remember statistics.
Right.
So we should be doing about 40. We could be slightly more than that.
Okay. Then let's move on to the next question. What are the moments of disconnect in your culture? How is cultural competence manifested at different levels of the society? You see, in advanced countries, in the industrialized countries, some years ago, you could talk, like in American culture, about the country mouse and the city mouse. The people who live in big cities have another understanding of life, have another dynamics in their life. They dare to do more things. How is the reality in Kenya?
It is actually the same, that there's a big disconnect between urban life and rural life, almost extreme. In fact, it's always say that the gap between the richest and the poor is so wide, so wide you can't even begin to imagine. But the lifestyle, for example, the lifestyle in the urban areas, in the cities, is completely different from the lifestyle in the rural areas. That's a big disconnect, and that cuts across even the educational institutions. That cuts across industries. They're all concentrated in the urban areas. You don't get anything in the rural areas. That means the rural areas are the ones that mainly produce, the raw material, and then all the raw materials are either exported out or taken to the urban areas if the factories are there, using the middlemen. So you realize that there's a lot of influx, like a lot of people want to move from the rural areas to the urban areas. What has and that also then limits, the people in the rural areas, in that there's always people moving out, and people never moving back in, and so they kind of become redundant, in terms of development.
Mm-hmm.
But what is working now, since the new political dispensation, our new constitution, we actually got into the devolution, the devolved into the counties, where we have 47 counties now. And because of the devolved system, then we are seeing at least resources moving to the counties, to the rural areas, so that now the rural areas are also close or closer to the centers of power. They're closer to they're receiving or sharing in that national cake, sharing in the national resources, because then all the counties have to share in the resources, and that has helped uplift the rural areas. And I think if we continue that way, maybe 5-10 years down the line, we should see the gap closing in, because then even services are getting closer to the people, because everything initially was centralized in the capital cities, in the capital city Nairobi and the other cities, and we just have 2 other cities. But now, because all these services, even schools, you could almost count the national schools that we had. But now every county is striving to ensure that they have a good health facility, a good national school, a few good national schools. And then that way, then even the schools, because it was very clear that it was mainly schools in the urban areas that communicated in Kiswahili and English. You'd get a lot of the rural schools even teaching in their dialects, in the mother tongue.
Mm-hmm.
But now, with the devolution, then even the schools, if all counties are ensuring that they have good schools that will churn out students that are of national, that can move to the national universities, then they also have to compete with the other schools nationally, and that is helping actually close that gap.
Yeah.
But I think the beauty of the entire country, like I said earlier, is that with the language, with Kiswahili and English, then people are able to communicate easily. Right. And that doesn't then close out anybody from communicating with another from another county, even if the original dialects are different. Mm-hmm. But that has been very, very helpful in terms of uplifting the standards of the rural people.
Right. Is Kenya a federal country?
For now, yes.
How many states?
Not states. It's counties.
Counties. How many counties?
47 counties.
Okay. And what is the state organization, political organization? Is it a democracy? Do you have a president and the prime minister, or?
No, we have a presidential system where we have a president and a deputy president, and now we have members of. We have a bicameral parliament, mm-hmm. where we have the Senators. National Assembly and the Senate, mm-hmm. and the devolved counties, where we have 47 counties, mm-hmm. and the 47 counties then have a governor, and also have their own county assemblies, mm-hmm. which then run the affairs of the respective county.
Mm-hmm. And for smaller localities, you have mayors or something?
Now, because of the members of the county assembly are the ones that represent those local counties, mm-hmm. and then report, have their own assembly at the county level, that then deal with the intrinsic issues of each of the locations, because we go down to the location, to the sub-location, to the ward, and all those are taken care of at the county level.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
but previously all these used to report to the central government.
Right, right. Let's move on to the next question. What is the treatment of women and minorities in your country? For example, access to education, access to jobs.
Women have been discriminated against for a long time. Kenya is generally a patriarchal society where everything, was vested. In fact, for the longest time, men owned everything. But we're grateful that the new constitution is very progressive in terms of addressing the women's concerns and the women's rights, so that now we are seeing actually an executive that is very keen on ensuring affirmative action where there's a gender representation at all levels. It's only through affirmative action that we have seen for the first time women, a third, a two-thirds representation rule in the political sphere. We haven't achieved it yet. We haven't reached there. I think we are at 22%, but we have a deadline of ensuring that that is achieved by August of this year. But also that then the executive is ensuring that since Parliament is elective, then all the other positions that are of appointment to the public offices have a third representation of women at each level, and where there's the man that is at the top, then the deputy would be the woman, and vice versa. So this is the first time that we are seeing a very deliberate attempt towards addressing the concerns of women. Then also that what traditionally used to be perceived as women's jobs, or what used to be perceived as a male domain, then is also being deliberately addressed, so that the officers ensure that there is a one-third gender representation of either gender in appointments to public offices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How about minorities? What kind of minorities do you have in Kenya?
The minorities are, of course, women are considered minority.
Right, right.
They're majority in number, but of course they're considered minority because of the opportunities that are available to them. Mm-hmm. Then the people living with disabilities are also considered at least a marginalized group, and that's why there's actually quotas that are set aside for very specifically for people living with disabilities, and then also the youth as a very special group are being looked at, like they need, the leaders of tomorrow, and then their issues have to be addressed in a very specific way, and so they're also viewed as a minority. But traditionally, the people that you view as minorities, maybe among the tribes, you realize that some of the tribes actually were either had very few people in terms of numerical numbers, and so they would consider themselves a minority, especially the Maa speakers, like the Samburu, like the Ogiek. There are some among the 42 tribes that consider themselves a minority because of the numbers compared to the bigger tribes.
Is it maybe happening because of historically moving the border towards a country or another, and then you're left with a minority from a bordering country, or not?
That too has contributed to some of the tribes that might consider themselves a minority, where you find that we've cut across, and so some of the community on the Kenyan side, and maybe the other of the community on the Sudan side, or on the Uganda side, or even on the Somali side. But I think it's been more, yes, the population rather than just the border. That number of people are not as many as the others, because we have tribes like the Gikuyu, the Luo, the Luhya, the Mijikenda, that are really big in terms of the numbers. Mm-hmm. So if you compare a tribe like that to another that almost has an eighth of the population of the big ones, then those want to consider themselves the minority.
Mm-hmm. How about religious minorities?
Yes, religious minorities are there because especially the traditional religious groups, there are those that are cultural religious groups, but otherwise, other than those the cultural groups, Kenya's other religious groups is mainly divided between like the Protestants and the Catholics. And so the Protestants then breaks into many other smaller who might not really call themselves minorities, but just because they are under the big umbrella of either Protestant or Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, like I said earlier, the Muslims might want to consider themselves minority because then, in terms of the comparison between the Christians and the Muslims, then the Christians are far much more than the Muslims.
Do you have many American, organizations, religious organizations that come and operate on your territory?
Yes. I would not be able to name many of them, but there are plenty. There are many churches started by evangelists or have a connection with the mother church in America, just come in and start, some kind of movement. So I think, yes, in terms of religion, I think there's been a lot of American influence on the Kenyan religious scene.
I saw a documentary recently, and it's not necessarily linked only to Kenya, but in different African countries where such organizations operate. But for example, the finding of the documentary was that these organizations, through their religious ideas, are actually spreading more hate towards homosexuals, for example, or other minority groups. What's the situation in Kenya?
I think Kenya as a country has not quite embraced issues of lesbianism and homosexuality and bisexual. And I think it's more just like a cultural thing. It's new to the Kenyan culture, and so it takes time. Any change, um, any new traits would take long, especially to see. So those for people who have maybe traveled and been exposed and they begin to appreciate, they might start to feel, okay, we understand what this is. But for the majority of Kenyans, it's not even a discussion that they want to entertain. It's not something that they would want to sit at a table, even here, debated, even in places like Parliament, because I'm sure even politicians are very careful because that is maybe one sure way of losing your seat. If you went into a debate like that, however reasonable that you may sound, I don't think the society is ready yet to appreciate such people as just a minority that can be dealt with. So I think there's still an uphill task in terms of making the communities or the society understand that maybe this is an aspect of life that just needs to be dealt with like any other.
So there's two aspects usually about sexual minorities that maybe, first of all, is it or not accepted by the government? Is it illegal to recognize that somebody is part of a sexual minority like lesbians or homosexuals or bisexuals or something like that? Is it illegal or not?
I think it's very, like I said, it's very silent because the community doesn't take it. But you also want to be politically correct because you don't want to shut out any people of the community.
Right.
So it's very silent. The laws are very silent on that.
But on the other hand, if somebody comes out of the closet, are they punished by the community, or do you have such cases?
No, like I said, they'll just feel like outcasts from the communities because people do not accept them. But nobody will take you to court for being a lesbian. Nobody's going to charge you in a court of law for being a homosexual, for example. But it is the stigma that is actually attached to it. Then
Right.
stigmatizes the homosexuals or the lesbians to want to kind of live in this cocoon of their own without like coming out and singing about it.
Right.
And
Yes.
of course, people have been brave and they've talked about it even on media. They've come out clear and said, we need our rights, we need to be recognized, we need to be appreciated, but nobody wants to come out clear and say, okay, now, these people have a case and we need to listen to them.
Right.
That's why I said it's a bit silent, but it's not outlawed.
So it's harder for the politicians to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it's very hard for them to come out clear and acknowledge.
Okay, moving on. What is the perception of foreigners in your country? Are there differences concerning the origins of those foreigners? For example, in a country like France, there were always problems between populations that were Germanic. They were perceived differently than the main population in the country. So do you have people from other countries around you or from European countries? Or recently, I understand in Africa there's more and more Chinese. What are the transformations nowadays concerning this in Kenya?
I think Kenya is a very liberal country, and right from independence, even after we gained independence from the British, the people were never sent away like leave. Those who wanted to stay on stayed on, acquired land. There are many foreigners that have become citizens through, is it called naturalization, through application, and live in Kenya as citizens. They own property. So that has never quite been an issue. In fact, maybe if you want to be critical, you will realize that there is a lot of respect for maybe the foreigners, because a lot of the foreigners that would come to Kenya or that have settled in Kenya, of course, have the resources, have the money, and maybe have a lot of property. So they're either commercial people, they're property owners, they're engaging in business, they're employing people, so they're actually held in high esteem. So a lot of the foreigners have actually invested because they're given that preferential treatment.
Yeah, I have a colleague here who is from Ghana, and he was telling me, because he's been in his sabbatical for half a year, and he was telling me that there's a lot of Chinese investors who are changing the dynamics of doing business in his country. Is it happening the same in Kenya?
Yes, the Chinese are everywhere. They've come in their numbers. You don't miss them anyway, especially in road construction. I think they've taken over all the road construction in the country. But I think also as they come in as business partners, or as investors, or as partners, of the government in terms of having their input in road construction, where they show a lot of expertise, then they also find a way of seeping into other areas that would be of interest. So there is definitely a noticeable influx of Chinese in the country, including actually having a school, a branch of that teaches Chinese at one of our main universities, the University of Nairobi, and also a steady increase in terms of interest of the Kenyans to also learn the language.
And they're bringing also workers with them for construction?
Yes, they have a lot of, they use some of the Kenyan labor, but they also have their own that come on the ground.
Okay, and they build their own colonies separately?
Yes, they have a system of, like huddling together and just doing whatever they need to do, and then, they clear, like after they've finished. But at least they've had one positive thing that I personally can say I've seen, is that they do a good job in terms of road construction, because whenever initially those roads, the kind of roads that were constructed used to be substandard, but now you look at the roads and you feel, okay, at least this road might be here for the next 5 or 10 years before, we see it chipping.
What? Interesting. Do you have any foreigners who establish themselves, at least in Nairobi, from Western countries?
A lot of them. In fact, a lot of let me just say a lot of, not necessarily just in Nairobi, but a lot in Nairobi, quite a lot again on the coastal region, Mombasa, Lamu, Malindi, quite a lot, like a lot of the property in the coastal region actually belong to foreigners. I think mainly Italians and, and the others. And then a lot of the foreigners have also big farms, like in parts of the Rift Valley, where we initially had settlers. For those that decided to remain behind and have vast property still invested, I know that a few of the ambassadors may have also been here and after, bought property and even after their term ends, have come back to settle in Kenya. Wow. So yes, there's a lot of people from the Western countries.
Okay. What is the level of study of foreign languages or other disciplines like geography or history in your country?
Like I said earlier on, we are very diverse. Mm-hmm. The Kenyans just learn about every language that there is to be taught, as long as we find there are teachers that come and establish the land. Because I say that because I know I see like the Swedish school, I know that there's a German school, I know that there's a GHC system, which is a British system, being taught in quite a few schools, not just one. There's an American school that I know of. There's, like I've just told you now, there's a department of Chinese at the University of Nairobi. So I think we're very open, and I see I've gone, my own daughter went to a Spanish school in town, a school that was teaching Spanish. And so I think for foreign languages, it's just the expertise and the entrepreneurial skills of anybody who wants to establish that and go through the system to get the right license, and that is taught. And like I said earlier on, our education system is actually, in fact, analysts have said it's too heavy for the students because they're loaded with so much information and knowledge right from elementary level, so that before I even ever went to the United States of America, I knew exactly where America was. I knew how many states there were. I haven't been to Canada, but I know about the Canadian prairies. I haven't, so our geography and our history is very broad, and it covers the whole world.
And for foreign languages, apart from English, what other languages are studied? For example, in Romania, I had to take a foreign language, and I studied English since the second grade, and then French since the fifth grade until the 12th. What is the situation in Kenya?
Kenya does not emphasize, just like I saw, I think in the United States, those need like for a foreign language, like an extra language. In Kenya, it's not compulsory. What's in compulsory in Kenya is English and Kiswahili. Mm-hmm. That is taught right from elementary level, primary school, all the way to high school, and they're examinable. You're examined on them when you are moving from primary school to high school, and even when you're completing high school to go to the university or college. The two, English and Kiswahili, are examinable languages. Mm-hmm. But other than that, then there are even schools that offer all those other languages, French, Spanish, but it's by choice. Mm-hmm. You can choose to have maybe you want to be a linguist, so you choose to have many other languages that you want to study, but those are not compulsory. So that then is driven by one's desire to maybe work through a language to acquire whatever the vision. Because I know, I'll give you an example that like one of the requirements of working at the United Nations is having one extra language. So if somebody aims at working at the United Nations, then they'll be very quick to start thinking of what would be my third or my extra language, and then start to follow that call and identify a school that then offers that kind of choice in terms of foreign languages. But otherwise, other than the two, the rest are not compulsory.
Right.
They're elective.
Right. How are foreign cultures represented in your country's media? You said that Kenya is very diverse, that you learn about a little bit about everything and about everybody. But how are they represented? Because you are working for a broadcasting corporation, you know. In my country of origin, Romania, for example, I knew that they were approved at the level of the state, the for each channel, television or radio, how much it should go in terms of hours per day per week, from national production, European production, American production. How is it for you?
No, there's no clear policy
Okay.
on content in terms of other of the foreign countries. But what is clear is that you must carry, oh, is it 60 or 40%? I'm confusing. I think six. Okay, it's either 60 or 40. I just need to check that. But you must have 60% local, and then you can have 40% foreign. But that doesn't then tell you that out of the 40, this is the way that you're portioned. You know, the different cultures. It just cuts down on, like if you're going to get any foreign content, whether it's in documentaries, whether you're linking to news channels, or you having movies or soaps, then it's up to you to know how to balance that. There's no clear cut, but they are clear, very clear on carrying foreign content. I mean, sorry, carrying local content.
Right.
So that's why if I talk about my station now, you'll find that sometimes we have a CCTV, but CCTV that is Chinese, that is run from this country, from Kenya. So it's CCTV Africa. Then we're also sometimes patched to BBC at a certain point. There's a contract with BBC. Then we might have, when we're looking for soaps, we sometimes have American soaps. Sometimes we have Mexican soaps. Sometimes we have soaps from Philippines. So it's all they're all mixed up. I think it's more what appeals to the audience. When they go to get the programs, then you're looking at what's trending, what the audience would want to identify with, and then going for very specific content that would because media in Kenya is a business more than anything else. Other than the national broadcaster that I work for, the rest is business. So they want to make the best out, the most returns from their broadcasts, and so they must have an audience analysis that then guides the determination of the content.
And the movies are dubbed or with subtitles?
A lot of the movies are in English, and those that are not are subtitled. But like I said, because you do an audience analysis, you also want to see what would the audience like. Would they like subtitled movies, or would they rather go for English? Like ensure that they're already translated. I'll tell you that there's one of the soaps that I watched that I was surprised. It's that the Chinese are actually the Chinese have a soap that is translated into Swahili. And until you see it, so it's very very competitive. Like you mentioned earlier on, there's also then this new the Nollywood.
Nollywood, yes, in Nigeria,
movies,
yes.
The Nigerian movies that are coming in from Nigeria and West Africa that have kind of found their niche or a very large following, and they're also penetrating very 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 seriously a lot of the audiences. You'll see them running across all the channels, and once that happens and they see that Kenyans are following, then of course they get very interested. I think another dynamic that has come to play, I don't know whether it was coming in another question, but that is changing the media landscape, is the migration, the digital migration. That for a long time we have been on analog, and we have been used to prescribed content from channels, from broad media outlets. But now, because of the digital migration, there's so much space has been opened. So many channels are coming up. People will be able to get very specific contents coming out of every channel, and that has just kind of mixed up the whole market, and people are still trying to grapple to find their bearing in the market.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any channels that are owned by companies outside of the country? Television channels or radio channels?
Yes, a lot of them are owned. Quite a few are owned by foreigners. Actually, one of the big media houses, the Nation Media House, is owned by a foreign. At least has of course shareholdings of locals, but the majority shares are for a foreigner.
What country?
His Highness the Aga Khan.
From where?
The Aga Khan, His Highness the Aga Khan.
Anglican?
The Aga Khan.
Aga Khan, right. That's from India?
I think originally, I just know it's Aga Khan and Ismailia, but I think I'm not sure about the original country, but
right.
I know that he holds the majority shares in the Nation Media Group.
Right.
That and the media has both print, radio, TV, and is actually regional. It's not just in Kenya; it's also now in even Uganda.
Okay, we are getting very close to the end of my interview, and I thank you very much for your time. What are the what are the cultural conflicts in your country? How are they represented in the media? How are they addressed?
Yes, there's a lot of. I think the big conflicts we have are mainly tribal, like I mentioned earlier, the 42 tribes. Mm-hmm. A lot of the country, the tribes that share a lot of their cultural values, like maybe the pastoralists, that rear a lot of cattle, would be fighting like many times over cattle, raiding each other, mm-hmm. Cattle rustling, taking the cattle away, killing each other in their numbers, and that just goes on and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. Another big cultural difference among the different tribes, or rather some of the tribes, is conflict around land. Kenyans hold land very dearly. We rather have this very sentimental attachment to land, to so much to the extent that you will find people killing each other because of land. You'll find, in fact, a lot of the injustices that you see today, a lot of the political differences you see today, when you go deep to understand, you find that deep down they emanate from land differences, mm-hmm. and that has been a major problem, to the extent that in fact maybe one of the values that I should have started with when we're comparing the Kenyan culture and the American culture is the attachment to land. Like, Kenyans are so attached to land, so that we have two homes. Like now I'm in Nairobi because I'm working in Nairobi, but I have a rural home where I have a small piece of land, or where my parents have a small piece of land where we are able to farm, or we're able to do whatever it is. And so that's where I call home. You don't find me calling Nairobi home, even when I'm in my home. Uh-huh. And like in the United States, where you saw if somebody moved from California and went to New York, for example, then New York becomes the home, and they don't even think about California. They'll just say, I moved from California and I'm in New York, uh-huh. And there's no, that is it. Uh-huh. But here, there's so much attachment to land, and it causes a lot of conflict, uh-huh. Major conflict, large scale and small scale, at very communal level, uh-huh. between neighbors, and then large scale where we have even mega corruption issues surrounding land. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So that is a very, very big a big issue.
So I guess these conflicts are not really addressed. They are continued. Yes.
No, they've never quite been addressed and solved. The way they're solved has been very temporal. Like it just takes care of that situation, but you see them rearing their head again in another setting. In fact, initially one of the issues that the biggest disadvantage that women had, and that's why I said the new constitution is progressive, is that women did not own any property, culturally, until the new constitution then recognized women as also owners, of property, and also can have. So now it changes the landscape, because now if you're married, then you are as much the owner of the land like your husband, which never used to be the case. When you got married, you forfeited everything from your parents' place because you're married, and when you move into your husband's home, then you're of course part of the husband's property, because then everything in that home, including the land and the lady, become his property. But that is also changing, where now women are allowed to even inherit property from their parents.
Right. So in the past, if a woman divorced her husband, actually she couldn't dare to divorce her husband because she would be left with nothing.
Yes, because you can't go anywhere. You left home, so you were displaced. You don't have anything there, and if you leave your husband's place, and that's why a lot, you rarely heard of divorce in the cultural, real, traditional African setting, because even your parents could never allow you to divorce. You go and they tell you they'll go through some cultural activities of preparing you and giving you some kind of token, to carry, which I think shows remorse, and go back to your husband, and they come and sit. There was nothing like there would never be, like, you can never guarantee, you'd never guarantee a divorce in an African nation. In fact, there was nothing like divorce. It was if you went to your home, it was very temporal. She's visited and she's coming back. But partly that was the problem was you didn't have. Right. You've never had a hold on anything, so you kind of just hung in the balance.
Right.
And so you are safer with your husband where your children are, and you just hoped that one day when your children grow, then they're going to save you from whatever turmoil you might be going through.
Right, right. Okay, my last question here. Have you observed misrepresentations in public discourse, in the media, among regular people of your culture in the US or somewhere else? For example, in other African countries or in Europe?
I think there's a lot of, I think when I lived in the US, I observed that, I don't know whether to call it misrepresentation, but I think exaggeration of what Kenya or Africa is, and all pegged on negativity. So that I rarely saw a good piece from Kenya showing Kenya as a tourist destination, with these beaches, or with at the Masai Mara, with the.
So never the success stories. Yes.
No. So all I saw was either the poverty levels being so high, and so you see these miserable children, miserable women, carrying that around, or because this war somewhere, was broken up, and so there's all these about, those attacks. That's the kind of thing that you'll see. Like I rarely saw, like you said, positive stories. So and I think that is and even when it was just a cultural thing, like even the kind of foods they'll be looking, it won't be the rich vegetables that we eat, and maybe that's why people are healthy or they live that long. It will be more about maybe the rats that are being eaten in Ghana, stuff like that. Yeah. So there's actually a lot of emphasis on what I might quote unquote call negative publicity for Africa.
How about perception in other media productions? Like you said that BBC has a stake in Kenya. Do they represent you more authentically or not?
No, it's not just BBC. What I said is like KBC has a contractual agreement with BBC for certain hours. Actually, I think from about 11 at night, or is it midnight to morning, we'll patch onto BBC. The other stations also have the same with other, like I think KTN or Nation has patches onto CNN. I don't know whether it's Kiss that patches onto Al Jazeera. So like the hours that we just patch, like you have get into an agreement with the foreign stations and dispatch on. This is mainly because, like I said, Kenyans are very outgoing and very progressive, and they want to understand what's happening around the world. And so through those channels, we're able to then follow the events of what's happening elsewhere in the world. And that's why within those, people were really keen within those hours. And in fact, maybe also because of the time difference, because then within those hours, then will be peak time for like you people in America, and somebody who is really keen on following what is happening will have almost 6 or 8 hours of CNN continuous.
Right. But in other, I don't know if you've ever seen any documentary or a feature movie from made somewhere else, like Great Britain or France or Italy, where there would be a subject, a topic linked to Kenya. What was the representation of Kenyans there?
Like I said, most, not all, I'd be wrong to say all, most foreign coverage of Kenya, like I said, would be more negative than positive. You can once in a while stumble on a documentary that would really just be a rich documentary about a very rich aspect, like maybe especially the great migration, that happens in the Mara. You can get something, the wildebeest migration. You can get something like that, or a lot of, like sometimes what I see on National Geographic, I can almost identify with it. You can see things about wildlife, about animals, that are very unique, maybe shown, but you see something, it's rare that it's even sometimes credited to Kenya. It will just, you'll just be looking at a lion, feasting on, or how they prey, how they get their food. But I don't think it specifically tells you it's this is a Kenyan documentary, or this is a Tanzanian documentary, or this is an African documentary. But when it just comes to carrying out features or specific documentaries about the country, I think there's more inclination towards negative portrayal than the positive portrayal.
Right. Okay, I think this concludes my interview. Again, thank you very much for your time. Would you be willing maybe Wednesday night or Thursday night, if I will put you in a group of emails together with my students, if they could ask you some questions linked to the answers that you gave me?
Sure, I have no problem. Did you say Wednesday?
Wednesday night or Thursday night. They have the class with me this Thursday night, but they will do it online, emailing you.
So this Thursday, after tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. Thursday night will be like my Friday morning?
I guess so.
Is that? It will be like my Friday morning. Okay. No, I have no problem. Just in case I travel, and how long do I take to respond? Should
It's
it be
just
immediate?
it's just in writing. If as soon as you can. I mean, if you want me, I can tell them to email you Thursday morning here, so it will be Thursday night for you.
That's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I just want to be sure that I'm able. But if it's just emailing, even on my phone, I can still do that wherever I am. So that should not be a problem.
They first.
So I have no problem. I'll be more than happy to.
They first will have to see these 2 videos to understand what we talked about, and then ask their own personal questions.
Okay, I have no problem. I'll be happy to participate.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry for all the trouble with the internet,
No
but
problem.
I'm glad that we
No
finally made it.
Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Thank you very much.
Bye.